Approvable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.
Opposition mounts against formation of Zionist National Guard under far-right minister. Opposition was on Tuesday mounting against the Zionist government's approval for the establishment of a National Guard force under the supervision of the country's controversial far-right security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Groups representing 1.7 million Arabs living in the Zionist entity, political opposition figures, and Zionist entity security service chiefs have all expressed concerns over the decision and the possibility of Ben-Gvir taking direct control of the armed force. The moves come in the wake of violent clashes in mixed Jewish-Arab towns in May 2021. On January 23rd, Ben-Gvir proposed the setting up of a National Guard to strengthen the Zionist police and border forces, modeled on Zionist border police currently deployed in the West Bank under the supervision of the Zionist Army Command. He suggested the new force could be augmented by additional police and 10,000 combat veteran volunteers. And in March, the minister proposed the National Guard be separated from the IBP and Zionist police force and be supported or subordinated to the Ministry of National Security. Ben-Gvir previously discussed the idea of a National Guard with the police chief, Amir Cohen. Strategic Director of the Givat Habiba Institution and political analyst Mohammed Darwish from the town of Iksal near Nazareth told Arab News that the establishment of a National Guard was part of a far-right political plan to have a paramilitary force funded by the government and backed by the state that could act as a strike unit against Arabs and opponents of the right. He said the majority of the members of this unit will be ideologically affiliated with the religious Zionist Party, and this is the containment of what they call the hilltop youth from the settlers in the West Bank. The Zionist police have been struggling to attract new recruits and is currently short of more than 1,000 police officers, and many Arabs fear Ben-Gvir will attract settlers and extreme right-wingers to his National Guard. Sarin Mohammed Jabarin, a media activist, told Arab News that approval for the new force was part of a political deal between Zionist Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir. Zionist political analyst Yoni Ben Menachem said that many security service and political leaders in Zionist Israel Zionist-occupied Palestine were concerned at the prospect of Ben-Gvir gaining direct control over an armed force and turning it into a militia. A committee comprising of all the Zionist security agencies will reportedly decide the exact powers of the new National Guard and submit its recommendation within 90 days. Zionist Police Inspector General Yaakov Shabtai and Chief of the General Staff of the Zionist Defense Forces, Herzi Halevi, are both believed to have misgivings about the formation of a National Guard under Ben-Gvir's control. Jalal Banah, a political analyst from Kufr Yasif in Galilee, told Arab News that Arabs in Zionist-occupied Palestine already distrusted the Zionist entity's police and feared the establishment of a National Guard, that it would further erode their citizens' rights. Yosef Jabarin, a law professor and former member of the Knesset, told Arab News that the real goal of forming a National Guard was to suppress Arab society and any demonstrations. He said, we see serious dangers from establishing these militias. He added that opponents will do everything in their power to prevent that from happening. There will be a popular reaction if they're formed. From Memo, Zionist police force will disintegrate if National Guard is under Ben-Gvir, says Commissioner. Zionist Police Commissioner Kobi Shabtai warned on Tuesday that the proposed National Guard should not be commanded by far-right National Guard Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir instead of the police commander. The step will lead to the collapse of the police force in addition to harming the security of Zionists, said Shabtai during a public event at Western Galilee College. He indicated that his opposition to the proposed arrangement is no secret and reiterated that the need to keep all law enforcement agencies under one roof. The creation of a National Guard subordinate to Ben Gvir is an unnecessary step that will have a very high price to the point of harming the personal security of the Zionists. On Sunday, the Zionist cabinet voted to approve the establishment of the National Guard, which Ben Gvir demanded should report directly to him. The controversial force is expected to consist of 2,000 officers who will be tasked with tackling national crime and restoring the rule of law when needed. The timeline for the formation of such a force is unclear, although it would likely take months. The powers and duties of the unit and to whom it will be accountable is under discussion by the Zionist authorities, including the security services and government agencies. The decision made will be issued within 90 days. Likud MK Tali Gottlieb has publicly opposed placing the National Guard under Ben Gvir's command. While such a body is necessary, it should not be under the authority of a cabinet minister, she tweeted. A cabinet minister sets policy, enacts regulations, prioritizes tasks, ensures an adequate budget, and is responsible for implementing his office's policies, but gives no direct instructions. Zionist Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara warned the government on Sunday that there is a legal impediment to the current version of the proposal and that the police can deal with the challenges they face without a competing body. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised Ben Gvir last week that he would put the issue to a vote in a cabinet meeting in return for the far-right extremists agreeing to put the judicial overhaul proposal on hold. A chorus of former senior police chiefs has warned against the plan, including former police chief Moshe Karadi, who said Ben Gvir might use force to launch a coup. Similarly, civil rights groups as well as opposition politicians have expressed grave concern over the proposal. They argue that it could politicize police work and undermine the principle of equality in law enforcement. From the cradle, Zionist police chief calls National Guard unnecessary step with steep price. Zionist far-right governments recently approved the formation of a civilian militia to be commanded by Jewish supremacist minister Itamar Ben Gvir. A civilian militia? Zionist Police Commissioner Kobi Shabtai warned on 4 April that the proposed National Guard should be established under police control rather than commanded by far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir, Middle East monitors reported. The step will lead to the collapse of a police force in addition to harming the security of the Zionist entity, said Shabtai. The creation of a National Guard subordinate to Ben Gvir is an unnecessary step that will have a very high price to the point of harming the personal security of Zionists. The Zionist cabinet voted to approve the establishment of the National Guard earlier this week. The civilian militia will report it directly to Ben Gvir as concession for agreeing to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's delaying efforts to pass a proposed judicial reform bill. The judicial reform measures, which would give Benjamin Netanyahu's ruling coalition the authority to pick and choose judges, sparked large protests in opposition to the government's plan in recent months. Many Zionists accuse Netanyahu of seeking these reforms to weaken the High Court of Justice, allowing the Prime Minister to give himself immunity from prosecution for corruption charges. The National Guard is expected to consist of 2,000 volunteers responsible for national crime and restoring the rule of law when needed, and is planned to be formed in the coming months. Israel's Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara warned the government on Sunday that an additional policy force was unnecessary and that the proposal to establish a National Guard would face legal hurdles. Several former senior police chiefs have warned against establishing the National Guard, including former police chief Moshe Karadi, who said Ben Gvir might use control of the Guard to carry out a coup. The Association for Civil Rights and Zionists called the proposed National Guard a private armed militia that will first and foremost act in mixed cities first and foremost against the Arab population. On 26 January, National Security Minister Ben Gvir called for establishing a National Guard to prepare the country for a new imminent war with Hamas. The Jewish supremacist minister made the statement after the Zionist army massacred 11 Palestinians during a violent raid in Jenin and its refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. And from Al-Mayadeen, Ben Gvir's private militia, and a clean sheet from a Nazi cabinet. Ben Gvir's message is that if Palestinians protest or defy the occupation, then they have to be dealt with through excessive force, which is utter defiance of internationally agreed standards of proportionality. If there were any doubts regarding the regressive extremist and racist orientation of the Netanyahu cabinet in pro-Israel circles around the world. Then they should be allayed. The Zionist demagogue Itamar Ben-Gvir and his controversial private militia, dubbed erroneously as the National Guard of Israel, has been given a clean chit by it's a private militia, right? It's a civilian private militia. It's a civilian militia. It's a private civilian militia. It's a PCM. PCM, private civilian militia, has been given a clean chit by the Zionist cabinet. This entails that ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people has been officially endorsed as a state policy, with Ben-Gvir further stating that the private civilian militia will target unrest in Palestinian communities as a blanket reference that a certain nationality and ethnicity is a source of trouble in Zionist Palestine. This constitutes crass racism, state-sponsored terrorism, and evidence of a socially exclusionary agenda. Ben-Gvir's private militia, with its offensive orientation, draws parallels with the Afrikaner Weerstandsbeweging, which remains a far-right white supremacist political party in post-apartheid South Africa. Prior to apartheid, the militant wing of the AWB was instrumental in killing members of the occupied black African population on the premise of safeguarding Afrikaner nationalism and creating a Boer Afrikaner Republic as a solely West Asian state. In 2023, Zionist militias are being formed for the purpose of ethnic cleansing and to create a Jewish supremacist state, a Zionist state, that strips Palestinians of their right to existence by specifically targeting the Palestinian population within Zionist-occupied Palestine. Ben-Gvir's ensuring that a fascist country, which has long been the aspiration of the Netanyahu coalition, actually materializes at the expense of Palestinian social exclusion. Additionally, the swift endorsement of the militia, which amounts to approximately 2,000 occupation troops working alongside the fascist Israeli police and the occupation forces, underlines the importance placed by the Netanyahu regime on orchestrating a state crackdown against the Palestinians. As per Netanyahu's office, a committee comprising of the Zionist occupation forces would determine the militia's authorities and whether it would be a subordinate to the Zionist police or take orders from Ben-Gvir. Should the latter hold true, then all non-Jewish communities living in Zionist-occupied Palestine should brace for a culture of complete impunity from the occupation forces, who'd be licensed to carry out arson and extrajudicial killings without any accountability. The Netanyahu government has essentially signed a death warrant for all non-Jewish communities, and particularly Palestinian Muslims. So essentially what happened in Hawara with the occupiers burning things down, they would be completely deputized with this force. A statement from Ben-Gvir's office also stated that the militia would deal with nationalistic crime, terror, and threats to state sovereignty without defining what's meant by either of those terms. Ben-Gvir's made it clear that Zionists want to depict all Palestinians living in Zionist Palestine, who are quintessentially an occupied population, as terrorists, while ensuring that the occupying force has a justification to undertake crimes against humanity. Any historian or analyst who studied the nature of the Zionist entity would vouch for the fact that the Zionist government mercilessly massacres Palestinians under the garb of self-defense, and the formation of a militia to curb so-called threats to sovereignty is just an excuse for more bloodshed. The truth is that with the state sponsorship of this draconian militia, the status quo will be further solidified, and the proliferation of illegal occupation and undercutting the just struggle for self-determination for the Palestinians. The demagoguery by Ben-Gvir is also telling. While speaking to an army radio, the militant stated that the Zionist occupation police, which has already carried out acts of brutality on Palestinians, does not deal exclusively with curbing so-called disturbances for which a militia is needed. His references to pro-Palestinian and legitimate protests in mixed Jewish-Arab areas in the Zionist regime as witnessed during the Gaza War of 2021, Ben-Gvir's message is that if Palestinians protest or defy the occupation, then they have to be dealt with through excessive force, which is utter defiance of internationally agreed standards of proportionality. Exclusively on Palestinians also entails an uptick in target killings, unabashed religious and racial profiling, and possible summary executions, which are all sanctioned by the Netanyahu regime. While some may conclude that such endorsements are diversionary tactics to sway public opinion, which has been overwhelmingly negative in Zionist-occupied Palestine over Netanyahu's crackdown on the judiciary, a more plausible explanation is that this plan was inevitable despite anti-proposal murmurs over Ben Gvir's project. An agreement to finance it with $276 million and skimming 1 to 1.5% of the budget from all ministries was eventually reached. This spending, which is aimed at a summary executions, is being largely ignored by the Netanyahu regime as Ben Gvir pushes for establishing a committee that includes representatives from the Prime Minister's office, the Security and Justice Ministries, as well as from the occupation forces. The decision involves participation from all institutions, which underlines its universal appeal in a regime that's adamant about Palestinian elimination. The endorsement also constitutes an embarrassment for all those who vouch for Zionists, including from within. Former Public Security Minister Omar Bar-Lev, for example, stated that the militia will be formed by a controversial minister who lacks understanding and was convicted of supporting a terrorist group called the Cock Party. For a regime that's controversial tools and mechanisms in place such as the Shin Bet, Mossad riot, occupation police, and a SWAT formation, this militia marks a new low for Israel. It's clear that Ben Gvir's militia and its endorsement by a Nazi cabinet is a threat to Palestinians as an occupied population. The world should immediately take notice. And watch this space. Your engagement through a like, a share, and a sub will accelerate us at warp speed towards a continuing